The call came at 3:17 a.m. I remember because the glowing red numbers on my bedside clock seemed to pulse with each ring, filling my dark bedroom with urgency. No one calls at that hour with good news. Margaret, it's Detective Sanderson. There's been an accident. I felt my stomach drop like I was plummeting on a roller coaster, my fingers clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The Hargroves, both of them, gone in an instant. A rain-slicked mountain road, a failed brake line, a guardrail that couldn't hold. David and Eleanor Hargrove, the couple I'd worked for as a nanny for 20 years, the parents of the children I'd raised almost as my own. The kids, I managed to whisper, my throat constricting. Are the kids okay? They weren't in the vehicle, the detective assured me, but we need someone to look after them right now. You're listed as their emergency contact. That night changed everything, not just for me, a 52-year-old career nanny with arthritis creeping into my joints and gray overtaking my once auburn hair, but for Emma and Jack, 16 and 12, who went to sleep with parents and woke up orphans. I never imagined that answering a newspaper ad for a nanny position back in 2003 would lead to this moment. Standing in the marble-floored foyer of the Hargrove mansion at dawn, two shell-shocked children clinging to me as if I were their only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. "What happens now, Maggie?" Emma asked, her voice small despite her teenage years. Her father's eyes looked up at me, searching for reassurance I wasn't sure I could provide. "We take it 1 minute at a time," I told her, smoothing her hair the way I had since she was a toddler. "Just 1 minute at a time." Little did I know that Eleanor and David had already determined what would happen next, and their decision would throw us all into a battle I never saw coming. 3 days after the funeral, I sat in the ornate office of Richard Barnes, the Hargroves' attorney. The children were beside me, Jack's legs swinging nervously, not quite reaching the floor. Emma stared vacantly at the wall of legal books behind the lawyer's desk. Before we begin," Mr. Barnes said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to say that David and Eleanor spoke very highly of you, Margaret. Very highly indeed." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I'd prided myself on being professional throughout my career, maintaining appropriate boundaries while still pouring my heart into caring for the children. But the Hargroves had become more than employers. After 2 decades, they were family, though I'd never presumed to call them that. "As you know," the attorney continued, "we're here for the reading of the will, and there are provisions that might come as a surprise." The door opened then, and 3 people walked in. I recognized them immediately. Eleanor's brother Thomas and his wife Stephanie, and David's sister Catherine. The air in the room seemed to thicken with tension. Thomas nodded curtly in my direction. Margaret, no warmth, just acknowledgement. He'd always viewed household staff as necessary furniture, present but not worth engaging with. Catherine at least attempted a sad smile. "Now that everyone's here," Mr. Barnes said, clearing his throat, "let's proceed." He began with standard legal language, and I half listened while keeping a protective arm around Jack, who had edged closer to me. When the attorney started detailing specific bequests, I prepared myself to hear about arrangements for the children, likely guardianship to Thomas or Catherine. I'd already been mentally preparing to say goodbye to Emma and Jack, a thought that felt like glass shards in my chest. "And to Margaret Lynn Thornton," Mr. Barnes said, his eyes finding mine over his reading glasses. "We leave our primary residence at 1420 Lakeview Drive, including all furnishings and contents." The room went silent. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Additionally," he continued, "we leave the sum of $12 million, to be held in trust for the continued maintenance of the property, and, more importantly, for the care and education of our children, Emma Claire and Jack David, over whom we grant Margaret full legal guardianship until they reach the age of 25. That's absurd. Thomas's voice cut through the silence like a whip. You can't be serious. They left everything to the help. I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin slightly as I tried to process what I was hearing. Not everything, Mr. Barnes corrected calmly. There are other assets that will be distributed according to the will. But yes, the primary residence and this specific fund have been left to Miss Thornton, with the explicit purpose of raising Emma and Jack. This is obviously a mistake, Catherine interjected, her earlier attempt at warmth evaporating. David would never. I assure you, the attorney interrupted. Your brother and his wife were of sound mind when they updated their will 18 months ago. They were quite specific about their wishes. Emma had gone rigid beside me. They wanted Maggie to take care of us? She asked, her voice wavering between hope and confusion. Mr. Barnes smiled at her gently. Yes, Emma, they were very clear about that. Something shifted in me then, a recognition of responsibility that transcended my shock. The children needed stability now more than ever. Questions and disbelief could wait. They needed me present. This will be contested, Thomas announced, standing abruptly. A nanny inheriting millions? Taking custody of Hargrove children? The courts will never allow it. You're welcome to contest it, Mr. Barnes replied evenly. But I should inform you that David and Eleanor left extensive documentation explaining their decision. They anticipated potential disagreement. Thomas's face flushed crimson. We'll see about that. He stormed out, Stephanie trailing behind with a venomous glance in my direction. Catherine lingered, looking torn. Margaret, this is a shock. You must understand. I found my voice at last. I understand, Catherine. I'm shocked, too. After they left, Mr. Barnes slid a thick envelope across his desk to me. They left this for you as well, a private letter. And Margaret, when they came to update their will, Eleanor told me, if anything happens to us, Maggie is the only one who will put the children first. Remember that in the days ahead. That night, after finally getting Jack to sleep, he'd had nightmares since the accident, I sat alone in the kitchen, the staff kitchen, where I'd always taken my meals, not the showcase kitchen where Eleanor had hosted cooking parties. It felt safer somehow, more familiar. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Dear Maggie, if you're reading this, then the unthinkable has happened. First, we're so sorry to place this burden on you, though we suspect you won't see the children as burdens at all. You might be wondering why. Why you? Why everything? The answer is simple and complicated all at once. You saved our family, Maggie, not just once, but every day for 20 years. You remember the day we met? You probably thought we were interviewing you, but the truth is, we were drowning. Eleanor was battling postpartum depression after Emma's birth. My company was failing, and we were fighting constantly. We were lost as parents and as partners. Then you arrived, with your quiet competence and unshakable kindness. You didn't just care for Emma. You taught us how to be parents. You held our family together during the darkest times. And then there was the fire. You never sought recognition for running back into a burning house to save Jack when he was just 3 months old. The newspapers called you a hero, but you brushed it off as just doing your job. Most nannies don't consider running into flames part of their job description, Maggie. There's more to the story, things we've never told you. But what matters is this: you are the heart of this family. The children love you, they trust you, and no one on earth will protect them and raise them with the love and wisdom they need, like you will. Thomas and Catherine will fight this. They've always been more interested in our money than our children. Don't let them intimidate you. Barnes has everything needed to protect our wishes. There's a safe in your bedroom. The combination is Emma's birthday. Inside, you'll find documents that explain everything. We love you, Maggie. You've been family in all the ways that matter. With eternal gratitude, David and Eleanor. I sat there until sunrise, the letter clutched to my chest, tears flowing freely for the first time since hearing the news. Not just tears of grief, but of overwhelming responsibility and unexpected validation. All these years, I thought I was just doing my job, loving these children as best I could while maintaining professional boundaries. I never realized they had seen me so clearly. Nee? The lawsuit came exactly 2 weeks later. They're claiming undue influence, Mr. Barnes explained over the phone, suggesting you manipulated David and Eleanor into changing their will. That's ridiculous, I said, stirring pasta sauce for dinner. I've been trying to maintain normalcy for the kids. Regular meals, homework routines, limited screen time. I didn't even know about the will until you read it. I know that, but they're painting quite a picture. A lonely nanny ingratiating herself with a wealthy family, isolating them from relatives, then swooping in to claim the fortune. My hand tightened around the wooden spoon. That's not what happened. Of course not, but Margaret, they're bringing your past into this. The spoon clattered against the pot rim. My past? They've hired investigators. They know about Westfield. The air left my lungs in a rush. Westfield, a name I hadn't heard in decades, a past I'd believed was safely buried. That sealed juvenile record, I whispered, from when I was 16. Money can unseal many things, he replied grimly. They're arguing that a woman with a criminal history shouldn't be guardian to minor children. I was a child myself, a scared, homeless teenager who stole food and got caught. The judge sealed those records because I know Margaret, and we'll fight this, but I needed to warn you. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. That night, after checking that the children were asleep, I went to the master bedroom, a room I'd only entered to clean or deliver laundry for 20 years. The safe was behind a landscape painting, just as the letter had described. My fingers trembled as I entered Emma's birthday, April 17, '06. Inside was a thick manila folder labeled Westfield Incident and a USB drive. The folder contained newspaper clippings I'd never seen before. Headlines jumped out at me. Local teen hero prevents tragedy. Homeless girl saves wealthy couple from home invasion. Charges dropped against teenage theft. Suspect after heroic act. With growing confusion, I read accounts of how a 16-year-old runaway named Margaret Thornton had stumbled upon a home invasion in progress at the Westfield estate, called police, and then created a diversion that allowed the couple inside to escape unharmed. The final article included a quote from the homeowners. "We owe this young woman our lives. We never got to thank her properly. She disappeared from the hospital before we could speak with her." My hands were shaking as I connected the USB drive to the laptop that had been Eleanor's. A video began playing, a much younger David and Eleanor sitting side by side. "Hello, Maggie?" Eleanor's voice filled the room. She looked so vibrant, so alive that tears sprang to my eyes. "If you're watching this, then something has happened to us, and you found the safe. We need to tell you something we should have told you years ago," David continued. "The day you came to interview as our nanny, we already knew who you were." Eleanor nodded. "You didn't recognize us. Why would you? You were delirious with fever when they took you to the hospital after the Westfield incident, but we recognized you immediately. You were the girl who saved our lives." I sank onto the edge of the bed, stunned. We were visiting my parents, David explained. They were out of town, and we were house sitting. When those men broke in, if you hadn't been there, hadn't called the police and created that distraction, we looked for you afterward, Eleanor continued, but you'd vanished from the hospital. It took years, but we never stopped searching. When your application came across my desk, your name, your age, it all fit. The interview was a formality. We already knew we wanted you in our lives. Not just out of gratitude, David added quickly. You were qualified, intelligent, kind. But yes, we wanted to help the girl who had helped us, even if you never knew. We debated telling you so many times, Eleanor said, wiping away a tear. But we worried you might feel awkward or think we only valued you for that one act. And that wasn't true. You became essential to our family because of who you are every day. They explained how they'd kept tabs on my sealed record, making sure it remained sealed, using their influence to protect me as I had once protected them. So, you see, Maggie, Eleanor finished, when we say you saved our family more than once, we mean it quite literally. I sat in the dim light of their bedroom, my bedroom now, though it didn't feel like it, and let the truth wash over me. The strange twist of fate that had brought me to this family. The secret connection we'd shared without my knowledge. And now I understood what was in the safe that could help fight the lawsuit. Proof that the Hargroves had known me long before I became their employee. Proof that their decision wasn't sudden or manipulated, but the culmination of a 25-year journey that began with a terrified teenage girl who, despite her own problems, couldn't walk away from others in danger. The courthouse steps were swarming with local reporters when we arrived 3 months later. The story had captured public attention. The wealthy couple's will, the devoted nanny, the furious relatives. It had all the elements of a sensational drama. Don't make eye contact, Mr. Barnes instructed, as he guided me, Emma, and Jack through the crowd. No comments. Inside, Thomas and Catherine sat with their attorneys, a united front against me. Thomas smirked as we entered, confidence radiating from him. I wondered if he'd already mentally spent his anticipated windfall. Oh, Emma squeezed my hand. At 16, she understood everything at stake. We're going to win, Maggie, she whispered. Mom and Dad knew what they were doing. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Patricia Holloway, called the court to order. Thomas's attorney presented their case first, painting me as a manipulative employee who had isolated the Hargroves from their loving family, taking advantage of my position to secure an inheritance. Your Honor, he said, pacing dramatically, Miss Thornton has a criminal record, a history of theft, and now, conveniently, she has managed to steal the Hargrove fortune from its rightful heirs. I felt sick as he twisted my teenage desperation into calculated deceit. Catherine wouldn't meet my eyes, but Thomas nodded along enthusiastically with every accusation. When our turn came, Mr. Barnes approached calmly. Your Honor, Miss Thornton didn't manipulate her way into the Hargroves' lives or their will. In fact, their paths crossed long before she became their nanny. He presented the newspaper articles, the police reports, and finally, most dramatically, the video testimony from David and Eleanor themselves, recorded years before their deaths. The courtroom fell silent as David and Eleanor explained on screen how I had saved their lives when I was just 16, how they had searched for me, and how finding me again had felt like destiny. The Hargroves didn't leave their estate to Miss Thornton, despite knowing her past, Mr. Barnes concluded. They left it to her because they knew her character, from the day she risked her own safety for two strangers, through 20 years of devoted service to their family. But it was Emma who delivered the final blow. Asked by the judge if she wanted to speak, my brave girl stood and addressed the court. My parents weren't manipulated, she said firmly. They were brilliant people who knew exactly what they were doing. Maggie has been more present in my life than Uncle Thomas, who sees me once a year at Christmas and still calls me Emily half the time. A murmur of laughter rippled through the courtroom. Thomas's face darkened. When I had nightmares, it was Maggie who sat with me until I fell asleep again. When I got my first period, it was Maggie who helped me. When I failed a math test and was afraid to tell my parents, it was Maggie who helped me study and build up the courage to be honest. Emma turned to look directly at Thomas and Catherine. You're fighting for houses and money. Maggie is fighting for us. That's why Mom and Dad chose her, because they knew she would always put us first. The judge's ruling came a week later. The will would stand. The Hargroves' wishes would be respected. The children would remain in my care. Outside the courthouse, Thomas approached me while the children were talking with Mr. Barnes. This isn't over, he hissed. You've robbed our family. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I looked at this man, so consumed by greed that he would orphan his niece and nephew a second time, and felt a strange sense of calm. I know exactly what I am, Thomas, I replied quietly. I'm the person David and Eleanor trusted with their most precious treasures. That's a responsibility I take seriously. Maybe someday you'll understand that there are more important things than money. 5 years have passed since that day in court. Emma's away at college now, pre-med, making her parents proud. Jack's in high school, lanky and thoughtful, with his mother's artistic talent and his father's analytical mind. The mansion still feels too large sometimes, but we've made it our own. I moved out of the staff quarters into a guest suite, never quite comfortable taking over the master bedroom that still feels like it belongs to David and Eleanor. Sisse, I've established a foundation with part of the trust money, providing training and support for young people aging out of foster care. It seemed fitting somehow, honoring my own past while creating better futures for others. Thomas eventually apologized after his own son got into trouble, and I helped connect the family with good legal counsel. Catherine has become a regular visitor, finally getting to know her niece and nephew as people rather than obligations. Rito. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, I sit in the garden Eleanor loved so much and think about the strange twists of fate that brought me here. How a desperate act of courage by a homeless teenager connected her to the family that would eventually become her own. How sometimes the families we create matter more than the ones we're born into. I never set out to be anything other than a good nanny. I certainly never expected to inherit millions or raise 2 children to adulthood, but life rarely follows the paths we expect. Yesterday, I found Emma sitting in the kitchen, the family kitchen, not the staff one, looking through old photo albums. She paused at a picture of herself at age 3, sitting on my lap while I read her a story, her parents looking on with obvious affection. You know what I remember about this day? She asked as I sat beside her. I shook my head. Nothing specific, just feeling safe, loved. She looked up at me. That's what you gave us, Maggie, every day. Your parents gave you that, I corrected gently. All 3 of you did, she said, closing the album. Family isn't always blood. Family isn't always blood. As I write these words, I'm reminded of something Eleanor once told me during a rare private moment. Sometimes people come into our lives for reasons we don't understand until much later. I understand now. Sometimes we save each other. Sometimes we become each other's home. And sometimes the most unexpected inheritances are the most precious. If you're reading this and wondering about your own unexpected connections, the people who've shaped your life in ways you may not even recognize yet. I encourage you to look deeper, to express gratitude while you can, to acknowledge the family you've chosen and the family that's chosen you. Because in the end, love is the only legacy that truly matters.